Hey there, girlfriend. Ingafay here. Super excited to be here with you today. I have another coaching girlfriend with me, Kate Johnson. We're going to get into who doesn't love a good story. We'll see you on the other side. Well, hey there, Kate. How you doing today, girl?
Hi, Inga. It's so good to see you again.
Yes, it's good to be seen. I'll definitely say that. So before we get into who doesn't love a good story, we want to get in your business, girl. Tell us a little bit about you, who you are, who you serve, and how you serve them.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, well, again, I'm Kate Johnson. I am the owner of 123 Limited and the host of the Comfy Chairs podcast. And everything I do is focused on leading and learning, specifically how to support leaders to get better every single day, and how can we make lifelong learning just part of how we do our business. So obviously I'm focused on people in leadership roles. I love first-time managers, people that have just come into their first executive role, and I support them through coaching, as you mentioned, and training, leadership development, and also on a broader scale, organizational development consulting, like looking at things like employee engagement, organizational culture, all the really fun stuff.
Awesome. So I'm curious, what makes a good story? I've often heard facts tell, stories sell. So I'm sure you're probably going to get into that a little bit, but tell us a little bit about what makes a good story.
Yeah. Well, I'll start by saying that stories are my favorite thing ever, whether it's a book or a movie or a TV show or sitting around the dining room table listening to people. There's so much to learn and engage with when you get to be part of storytelling. So I've put a lot of thought into, well, why is this story good and this one's just okay? Even if they're entirely about the same thing or on wildly different ends of the spectrum. And I think what I believe makes for a good story is that it is true. That doesn't mean that it's factual, because obviously fiction, fantasy, all those things can make great stories.
Right.
But there is something about a true story, whatever the subject is, whatever the teller is, that connects to our fundamental human experience. What we feel, what we dream about, what we fear, what we hope for, all of those things. So if it hits an emotion, if it hits a fear, if it helps us think different ways about what it means to be people on this planet, it's a great story. And that can come across in all different things. Like my brother-in-law is a phenomenal storyteller, and he can talk about like getting rear-ended at a stoplight and you are wrapped because he is able to just deliver this story in a way that you feel like you're there, and it connects you to what his experience was.
So when it comes to storytelling, do you have like a framework? You talk about your friend that you just really describes a great story. Is there a framework that you use, or how does that work?
Well, there are so many theories about this. I actually just came across in a book I'm reading a couple of different, there's the classic 5 acts that we probably all learned, way back in elementary school or junior high, where there's that, exposition, and then there's an event, there's an incident that incites activity, and you have your rising action, your climax, right?
Right.
Because that's the essence of it. But then there are also ways to think about the movement through good fortune and bad fortune. Kurt Vonnegut has created a graph where he talks about there's a beginning, the end. People encounter good fortune or bad fortune.
Right.
The example I've seen is Cinderella, who's slowly working her way up to good, has this horrible moment when the clock strikes.
Yep.
And then eventually goes up. Then just encountered today, I had heard of it before, but I hadn't seen it. Dan Harmon, who's a TV writer, producer, and actor, he has what he calls his story circle.
Oh,
And
okay.
you'll hear the same elements that you start with a character who's in their comfort zone.
Yeah.
But next, they want something, right? Then they enter this unfamiliar situation in pursuit of what it is they want. Checking
Yep.
my notes. They adapt to it. They get what they wanted, but it comes at a price
Yeah.
for them. So they return to the familiar situation, but they're changed.
Right.
You can kind of continue to circle around in that way. But again, it all kind of comes down to, we have a circumstance, there is a beginning. Things happen to people, whether they are familiar or fantastical, or sometimes horrific. And then we're given some sense of an ending.
Right.
And I can't get enough of them.
Wow. Wow. So, does being an introvert make it harder to tell a story? I'm curious.
Well, I think the answer is maybe. I mentioned my brother-in-law before. He is also introverted, but one of the best storytellers I know. Technically, I'm an introvert, and I fancy myself a bit of a storyteller. I think the barrier for those of us that are introverts is that we need to feel prepared in some way.
Yep.
That there has to be this, have I reflected on it? I think the real barrier for us is when we focus more on the listener than on the story itself. If we get concerned about the audience, and I don't mean we shut them out entirely, right? You obviously need to pay attention. Are people engaged with you? Do you see them responding? But if all you're concerned about is that external point and not the story,
Right.
and its flow and its intent and purpose, I think introverts, we tend to trip ourselves up that way. We'll end up in our head, ironically, because we're too focused on the other people. Right. But I believe introverts can be some of the best storytellers. I know you work with a lot of introverted people, and letting that quietness be like a font of stories, I think is a kind of a superpower that introverts can have.
Yeah, I strongly agree about the being prepared part. That's definitely something that we must do, is to prepare.
And we're wired for it, right?
We are.
Introverts are reflective, so it lets us be prepared. It's just, am I preparing for the story? Am I preparing for the way it comes across?
Right.
Or what have you?
Right. And then if we take the time to practice, I think that's really going to help really sell the story too, because the practice is really what helps you do that. And then what you said initially about us not getting in our own way, overthinking about what the person, the listener, what they're going to take from it, how are they going to empathize with it, making sure that we're present in the moment will definitely help the story be conveyed a whole lot better as well. So I'm curious, what have you learned about telling better stories? What are some things that helps the story be better?
Well, you mentioned practice. We've already talked about preparation. I also think that it's important to be a student of stories. Whether you're a reader or a watcher or a listener, are you paying attention to when you are captured by a story? Can you kind of hit pause and think, what about this is so amazing to me?
Right.
And study is it the structure? Is it the delivery? Is it the language choice? Is it the applicability?
Right.
And then give yourself permission to tell stories.
Yeah.
Find this opportunity. The great thing about stories and storytelling is it's hardwired. It's baked into human nature.
Yeah.
To be interested in, to learn from them,
exactly.
To listen for them, to remember them. Again, who doesn't love a good story?
Right.
Well, pretty much no one. So because it's part of the human experience, it's easy to practice.
Yeah.
And not putting too much pressure on yourself, I think, is really important. And one of the secrets, especially for people who have the opportunity, whether through presenting or networking or what have you, it's kind of a dirty little secret, is that you can have stories that you tell at certain points. Obviously you don't want to be granddad at the holiday meal who's telling the same 4 stories every single year.
Right.
And that's okay too. There's a type of place for that.
Right.
But I have a couple of stories that I tell for certain trainings that I conduct,
Right.
certain audiences, certain circumstances, that you could just have them in your pocket, and they don't necessarily need to be wildly new and inventive.
So when you're using stories, sounds like are you doing these in speaking engagements or?
Sometimes. My background, I've done a lot of classroom training for leaders.
Right.
I ran a learning and development department for a number of years.
Okay.
For a large organization with about 1,000 leaders in it, and would lead programs, the trainings themselves, but also sometimes events or retreats. So it is that kind of presenter mode, has been a lot of my stories. But also in coaching, stories are a great way to share object lessons without being too directive. And for those of your watchers that are in leadership roles, I think that's an important thing to take away, that you can give direction to your people in a way that's really engaging and memorable by making a story of the work or of the thing, and asking your employees to share their stories as a way to share knowledge on the team too.
Yeah, that goes right back to that adage that I said in the beginning, that facts tells, but stories tell, for sure.
Exactly.
For sure. So when you are engaging with your clientele and you're working with them and I guess taking them to the next level in their leadership journey, what type of stories do you share? I'm just curious. Are they life lessons that you've had, or are they more work related? I mean, what kind of stories do you share?
Honestly, this may seem really counterintuitive, Inga, but I like to tell stories of mistakes.
Yes. Okay.
Lessons learned. I know.
Relatable.
Yeah, I know when you were on my podcast, we talked about, kind of like the learning happens in the suck.
Yeah, it does.
The same thing. Because I think we can so readily put ourselves into that role of the person that messes up.
Yep.
That it can be really useful. If I may, I have an example of a story that always in my pocket stories.
Yeah.
So talking about how the way we interpret our surroundings and events isn't always the actual thing. It's not necessarily what the person intended. You may not have all the facts. I could explain to you, well, your perception isn't necessarily the reality.
Right.
Or I can tell you a story about it.
Yep.
And the story I love to tell, because it's short, I think it has some universal qualities in it, and it casts me as being the person that makes the mistake. So I'm a stepmom. And when my husband and I were first married, my stepson was about 7 years old.
Okay.
I don't have children of my own, and it'd been a long time since I babysat. And as a 40-year-old, who wasn't around little kids, I didn't really understand that sending a kid to bed was a whole production. It's not just, hey kid, go to bed. It's all right, it's time to go upstairs, go to the bathroom, use the bathroom, brush your teeth, wash your face, take off your clothes, put on your pajamas, and get in bed, right? You have to be really clear about what you expect.
Yep.
So this was one of the very first times that I was solely responsible for getting my stepson into bed. I think my husband may have been sick or out that evening, not fully in the picture, right? So I'm like, all right, kiddo, it's time to go to bed, do the things. It's warm weather with the windows open. It's been a really pleasant day. And he goes upstairs and I follow along with him, and he's grumbling a little bit because he's a kid.
Right.
He's 7, he doesn't want to go to bed.
Yep.
Our full bath is at the top of the stairs. And our bedroom is immediately to one side of it. So Charles goes into the bathroom. I go into the bedroom, and the door slams.
Oh, wow.
The door. you know how I reacted, right? Evil stepmother. I'm like, we do not slam doors. Don't,
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
I yell at him. I'm not proud, but I did. He's like, I didn't mean that. No, I'm sorry. I didn't. You know, he shuffles off to bed, having been yelled at by his new stepmom. Again, not proud. So a little bit later, I go upstairs to get ready for bed. I walk up the stairs. I'm gonna, go to the bathroom, brush my teeth, wash my face, all the things. And I mentioned that, it's springtime. We had the windows open. I live in an older house, charming little Cape Cod, right? I go up the stairs. I go into the bathroom. The windows are open. I turn around, and that vacuum that can happen when you have the windows open,
That's right.
catches the door and slams it.
Oh, so that's what happened.
And I realize, oh no. So the next morning I have to be like, oh, I am so sorry. I have all the information. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I'm sorry I got mad at you. And if I had paused in that moment after hearing the door slam and really evaluated what was going on, my stepson is an awesome human being. Of course he can slam a door. But I have an immediate reaction. Yeah. And when I react based on my interpretation, the story I've told myself, even though it's a fabulous story, I sometimes end up showing up like the evil stepmother.
Yep.
So the lesson is, get all your facts in order.
That's
right. Be curious, and then behave based on what you've learned. Yeah. So that's an example.
For sure. That falls right in line with what I was telling you about the ask versus assume.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Right.
So your that experience that you had definitely reiterates the power of questions, where you could ask them, hey, what happened? Why did the door close like that? And then maybe he could have explained to you and maybe told you, well, I just closed the door and then it just slammed.
Right.
And then you could have put two to two together. Oh, it was the window was open in there, and the breeze and the draft, and that's what happened. Yeah. So yeah, that was good. That was a great relatable story that I'm sure many of us, even if they don't have children, can definitely relate to.
Yeah, we've all had that moment where in a fraction of a second, we're like, I know what's going on, and I'm now going to have a huge response to it.
Exactly.
What I love about what you brought up is asking those questions of the other person too, because we all have our own stories.
Oh, we do.
Making them, interpreting our surroundings, and part of parenting, friendship, leadership, just being a respectful and kind human on the face of the planet is questioning other people to learn their stories as well. So it can be something like, hey, kiddo, why did the door slam? Please tell me more. Or it can be, well, tell me about why you need this service. Tell me a little bit more about what brought you here today. Right. What are you working on? What are you excited about? There's so many applications for drawing out somebody else's story. There's so much to learn, and it's a wonderful way to connect.
I totally agree. And even the question of why me? Why did you pick me over all these other people? These people, all billions of people that we have on this earth, and you decided to meet with me today. Why? Yeah. So yeah, for sure. Well, that was powerful. I love that. You went through. I'm just kind of dissecting what you did. You told us. You gave us the situation. You talked about what the action was, and then your reaction to it, and then your evaluation of it after it was all over with, and then your aha moment that allowed you in the morning to go say, look, I'm so sorry, Charlie, that I did that. I didn't realize that you didn't slam the door, because the window was open in the bathroom, which is what caused you to actually do that. So that's awesome. So what other goodies would you like to share with the audience today in regards to telling stories?
Yeah, what other goodies? So a little bit of a self-plug, if I may be so bold.
Sure.
I've mentioned a couple of times that I host a podcast, host and produce. It's called The Comfy Chairs. And like everything in my life, it's focused on leading and learning. Inga's been a guest, and we talked about authenticity and self-expression. The reason I bring that up in the space of stories is if you're somebody that likes to listen as opposed to read or watch, podcasts are a great way. And I'd encourage you to seek out the comfy chairs. I have a wide variety of guests, people that bring their own experiences and stories to share with us. And the timing's really good today. My next episode is with a woman who's recently published a memoir.
Oh,
And we'll
wow.
talk about reclaiming your story,
Right.
how stories and identity are connected. And I'm seeking out a few other people. I think storytelling is going to be a bit of a theme for the next few months as well, because it's just so powerful. And obviously, I'm a little obsessed.
So I don't know if I think you may have shared this, but I just wanted to reiterate this point. Where is a good place to really use stories when
Okay.
it comes to your coaching business?
Yeah. So for coaches, the place that I think it's really good to use stories is when you are trying to illustrate for that coachee, for that client, a way to be in the world. So to use the example we've already given, so I don't go into yet another story, if I'm working with somebody they're really getting in their own way because they think that their story, their interpretation of events is always the right one. Instead of telling them, well, you're going to cause yourself problems if you keep thinking that you're always right, people will shut down if you're that brusque with them. Say, hey, Inga, I'd like to tell you a story about a time when I thought my interpretation of events was absolutely right and some of the issues that it created. Can I tell you this story? So it's a way to help the person understand and imagine a real life example of when I act this way, it can, at best, hurt the feelings of a small child.
Right.
At worst, it can limit the decision-making capability of my team or whatever is appropriate.
Okay.
So I think if you're working with somebody who's maybe a little challenging, that they're used to their ways, their changing is happening a little slower. Stories, kind of like parables or folk tales. There's so much history about the role that stories play.
Yeah.
It's a way for us to say, let me show you, rather than tell you the thing.
Exactly.
Because one of the things that happens for people, and I'm just starting to learn about this, is when we hear a story, our brains kind of begin to mirror what's going on with the other person. It's this really, I think, miraculous thing that stories let us understand other people in a really significant way, neurologically, emotionally, socially. So even if I'm telling a story of my own behavior, when you listen to it, you can kind of feel yourself in the story.
Right.
Yeah. So it's again, show versus tell, which is a fundamental writing rule as well. So,
well, you gave us some good golden nuggets today, girl. I am so grateful for your time and you just sharing the power of stories. I've always been a strong proponent of stories because they show vulnerability. And I think that's what really people resonate with when you are connecting with your clients.
Agree.
Or really your audience, because people want to know, they want to feel real with you. And when you put all this fluff of perfection, they're just like, well, she don't understand at all what I'm going through. I need somebody that's gone through the suck as well and rised above it for sure. So
most definitely.
So thank you again for your time. Also, I wanted to show this right here. This is your link. Yeah, tell us a little bit about this before.
So this is a one-stop shop to find me, 123, out in the world, in the virtual world. That link tree will give you access to links to my website, to the podcast, to Instagram, and some other resources that are out there. You can find my LinkedIn profile through it as well. And I would love to connect with anyone, to hear your stories, to tell mine, to share in the work.
Awesome. So you guys got this link. You can connect with her. If something she said resonated with you, by all means, click the link, get in touch with her, and you guys connect. Thanks for watching as always. And if you know of anyone you would like me to interview, by all means, let me know. I would love to interview them. Just send me a DM. And thanks for watching. Bye for now.
Bye.